All right, today we have a phase one inspection, also known as a pre-pour inspection or a foundation inspection. I love doing these ones. I find all kinds of weird things. They put these things together real quick, and so it really is good to get another pair of eyes on them. How I'm going to lay this video out is I'm going to talk about the strategy first of how I go about inspecting these, and then I'll talk about each item individually so we can kind of do a layout. Maybe you can learn something there in the way. If I don't cover something, it's because each one of these, it's a different scenario, and we're going to do this again. So if you like these types of videos, please hit that subscribe button below and catch us on the next one. All right, let's go check it out. Okay, step one, whenever I'm inspecting these pre-pours, it actually starts with the approach. Whenever you walk up to the property, is I like to look at the grading. So the grading is one of the most important items because you want to make sure that your property is going to shed water. In these cookie cutter neighborhoods, it doesn't really show up in the report too often. It's because they already have these places pre-laid out. So the grading is going to normally be on one of the give me a second. One of the custom homes where you're building on a custom lot. So that's when it's going to come into play more. But you want to make sure that the property is shedding water. It's 6 inches over 10 feet, or there's a proper swell, so the property is going to shed water properly. Water is the #1 reason why foundations move. And if you have standing water or water's pouring into the structure, your foundation will move in the future. So the next step is I like to start my way out and work my way in. So I like to look at the former boards all the way around. So I'll walk around this property once or twice, more than once. I walk around it twice in 2 different directions. This helps make sure that I like to make sure all the boards are straight and that they have a 45-degree angle brace. It's really important that they're level too as well. So we'll take out the zip level and we'll test the levelness from side to side and front to back. The reason why you do this is because if you find out that it's out of level right now, they can fix it pretty easily. But if they pour that concrete, that's a whole different ball game. So this is the best time to test the levelness across your foundation and make sure those boards are flat. If those boards aren't flat and they're canted, you're going to get a sideways concrete wall. And then I also like to spot any deformities in the boards too as well. So if the board's warped or there's imprints in that former board, that will actually imprint onto the concrete wall too as well. So you want to make sure that you pay special attention to these former boards on the outside. The next step in this strategy is I like to focus on the beams and pads. So I like to break down, you're starting to see that I like to break down each section individually, and I look at that specifically separate. So I'll look at the beams and pads and I'll make sure that they match the plans that are on site that are drawn up by the engineer. It is pretty easy. You literally just look at the plans and then you make sure it matches. This step is a little tedious. Make sure that you don't rush through this. Every 10 feet, you stop and you take a look at it, because there's been several times where I've been walking, I'll be like, hey, there's supposed to be a built-out window right here. So it's really important that you take your time on this step and look at it as we go. Unfortunately, we don't have the plans for this site. This site isn't even ours, really. Our site is over there. They told us it was done, and it's not. So, but that is the strategy that we like to follow. So that's the next one. All right, I'm going to go and talk about the next tip next. The next thing I like to do after I do the beams and pads is I'll move on to the next area of the post-tension cables. I'll make sure the post-tension cables are per plan and that they're properly installed. Post-tension cables, there's a lot that they can do wrong with them, but just some basic facts about them. You can't have any of the metal exposed. You want to make sure that they don't use duct tape to wrap them up. They do that pretty often. They need to be 3 inches away from plumbing. Anytime that there is any elevation change, you need a chair on the elevation change. They cannot be twisted. They need to be securely fastened to the board. They have to be straight. They cannot be leaning. So there's a lot of things that you have to look for. They have to be 6 inches from the edge. So my dad actually puts on a really good class that's through RETS. If you're looking to learn more code related items with these, you can run through that class, or you can purchase maybe even the slideshow from him. I'll leave his contact information below. All right, let's move on to the next item. All right, the next thing that we like to look at is I like to focus on the rebar. The rebar on plans show up as a little dotted line on the side, and you want to make sure that the rebar matches the plan specifically. I find this all the time where it's not installed at all in the areas that they wanted to. So it's a pretty common find to find rebar not in the proper place. So yeah, so that's that. So the next item that we like to go to is I'll make sure that the plumbing is in the exact areas that matches the plan. It happens sometimes where we'll be doing the inspection and it needs to be like six inches to the left or 6 inches to the right. And that actually makes a huge impact whenever they're building the bathrooms down the line. So that's some basic steps with our strategy. Let's break down into it and dive into each item individually and show you some of the problems that we found with them. All right, so back to the beginning, and we're gonna talk about the former boards. These former boards, one of the most common things that we find every single time is they don't have backfill properly. They say they do this on the day of the pour. They'll come in and put backfill on there to prevent the concrete from overflowing in these areas, but who knows? But we make sure that it's in our report every time so they know that they're missing a lot of backfill over here. It's really important that you do this. It adds additional support to the board and it prevents them from wasting concrete and creating those deformities on the bottom of your slab. So whenever you're inspecting the pads, I like to walk on the edges of them and I like to walk on every single one. And you'll find it pretty often that one is poorly compacted and it just crumbles underneath you. So this is actually pretty bad because concrete's pretty heavy and I only weigh like 157 pounds. So, you know, if I'm knocking that pad over, you know, it's just gonna crumble whenever they start pouring concrete. The next step is, it's one of my favorite parts, is you can do most of this inspection just with a tape measure, your brain and your eyes. And that's why it's pretty nice. You're not walking around in a house. But anyways, going back into it, started rambling. You want to check the depth of the foundation. And whenever you're checking the depth of the foundation, the average thickness is about 23 inches and it needs to be 10 inches below grade. So it can't just be 23 inches and sitting on top of the earth. It needs to be 10 inches below the actual grade outside. So I'll show you how I get those measurements. Checking the depth is actually fairly easy. You just find an area where they have the pull string. The pull string's down on this site, or you can come to the edge of the foundation and you just make it as straight as you possibly can. And you just measure it from the top of the footer right here. And you can see this one is about 30 inches. It's 30 inches deep. So that's pretty good, but make sure that you do it all around the foundation. So there's the pull string over there. So I'll walk over there and show you too. Just because it's 30 inches here doesn't mean it's 30 inches everywhere. So it's very important that you check this in several areas, because the other day I found one that was 30 inches deep on one side of the house and it was only like 10 inches deep on another side of the house. So you want to do this in several areas across your foundation. So there you go. That's about 27 inches. So that's pretty good right there. And then we'll check it in several areas down the line. Okay, you know, it's actually pretty easy to know which areas to target specifically too, because as you walked around once already doing just your general scan, you can just eyeball it and be like, hey, that spot looks a little low. So you want to make sure that you focus on those areas that you did your general scan on. All right, so we did the beams, we did the pads. Let's talk about the post-tension cables now. All right, so with these post-tension cables, none of them are protected properly on the ends. With post-tension cables, one of the most important things is that they're protected, because what happens is the concrete adheres to the cable underneath them, the post-tension cable, and it can cause them to break a lot faster than they should at all. They shouldn't break at all if they're protected. So they need to make sure that sleeve goes all the way to the end. A lot of the times what they like to do is they like to add in duct tape. And duct tape is definitely not the fix. They actually have to recut another sleeve and wrap it around it so it's properly protected. The next thing is pretty much on every single one of your inspections, there's never enough chairs. You need a separation. They need to all be lifted properly off the ground, and even in the beams too as well. They need to be lifted off the ground. They're actually all lifted off the ground here, so that's pretty nice. And then the real close eye, you want to always make sure that they're not twisted. If they're twisted, that can lead to several issues down the line whenever they're pulling them tight. So yeah. Another thing that we can cover is sometimes, it's only happened once and it happened to my father, but they actually put the vapor barrier on top of the post tension cables. I don't feel like I needed to say it, but the post tension cables go on top of the vapor barrier. So that is another important topic whenever you're looking at these post tension cables. You always want to count them front to back and side to side and make sure they match the plans. All right, let's go hit the next item. Right there, I didn't cover two of the spots of the deficiencies we found. The first one is that there wasn't proper separation between the plumbing and the post tension cable. There needs to be 2 inches or at least a chair there. And then also the elevation changes. You can see right here the elevation changes going into the garage, and you need a chair separating the elevation change in the post tension cable. All right, let's check out the next items. All right, then one of the other things that you need to make sure that you're looking at is you're taking a look at the vapor barrier. The vapor barrier, you can't have any cuts or tears in it. You want to tape up any hole punctures. So a repair like this, what they need to do is they come in with another vapor barrier, they'll overlap it. It needs to be overlapped by 6 inches. So they can't just come in and tape it. If they do that, it's just going to come apart again whenever they start pouring the concrete. The next area is they need to make sure that all the plumbing stacks are capped. A lot of the times they like to just put a bag over it, or they like to just tape it. That isn't the proper way to keep all the debris or concrete out of your plumbing system before it gets you want to try to prevent anything from getting in there too early. So to keep it clean, they cap them off with hard caps. So that's how it should be right here. All right. Let's go on to the next item.
We got a triple whammy here at this drain line. So first thing that we notice is that the drain line is not protected by a sleeve, so concrete is going to rest directly on this, which could cause future issues. Second thing we notice is the post tension cables are too close to them. They should have a 2-inch clearance minimum so that when they tighten them, it doesn't snap the drain line. And last thing we notice is that the drain line goes from the P-trap and actually drains up. So it's a negative slope. So if we didn't catch this before they poured the foundation, these homeowners are gonna have all kinds of issues with this drain.
The next item right here is what we talked about is the rebar. Rebar is pretty easy whenever you're trying to inspect it. You just make sure that it matches the plans. Right here, you can see that this rebar isn't properly supported. It's just sitting down there in the beam. It needs to be braced, and what the rule is it needs to sit in the mid-range. So wherever the concrete is, say it's 4 inches off the pad, it needs to be at the 1.5 or 2 inch mark where that rebar is sitting. So right now it's not efficiently put in there, but whenever you're inspecting the rebar, make sure that it's sitting in mid-level and it's off the bottom grade. That's pretty easy, you know. There's not much else to look for whenever you're looking at rebar. The biggest tip that I can have whenever you're doing a pre-pour inspection is just make sure you take your time. If you're only out here for like 30 minutes or so, you're going to end up missing something. So if you feel like you did it too quick, make sure that you just do it again and walk it over again. You're like, oh man, I missed this tear, or I missed this hole, or these post tension cables aren't properly braced. All right, we're going to wrap up the video there. If you have any questions or comments about phase inspections or something else you'd like us to cover on phase inspections, please leave a comment below, and please always like and subscribe to the videos. Thanks guys. Bye.